Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 1st City of West Sacramento Planning Commission meeting. First up, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order, and we'll lead into the Pledge of Allegiance with Commissioner Wong. Thank you, Commissioner Wong. All right, first order of business is item number 1, presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the commission.
We don't have any.
Thank you, ma'am. Moving on to item number 2, correspondence and staff communication from the Planning Commission Secretary.
Nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. And item 3, disclosure of ex parte communications. Seeing, hearing none. Okay. Without further ado, we'll move on to the public hearing section of our agenda. Item number 4, public hearing regarding proposed tentative parcel map 5247 at 3071 Davis Road.
Good evening, commissioners.
Good evening, Elijah.
So item number 4 tonight is a continuation of the public hearing from the April 17th meeting regarding the proposed tentative parcel map number 5247 and plan development permit at 3071 Davis Road. Staff's recommended actions tonight are to reopen the public hearing that was continued from April 17th, certify the proposed CEQA exemption, adopt Resolution 25-5 PC, which approves the parcel map and the PD permit, and deny the request for waiver of underground utilities. So as a refresher, here is a look at the property and boundary of the map outlined in red. And here is the configuration of the proposed parcels. As was mentioned at the prior meeting, all new homes and structures would be built within the maximum buildable areas outlined in light blue on the map, with the remaining middle area of the map preserved as undeveloped area. So you'll notice here, the text on the slide indicates that each parcel here, 1 through 4, is 1.25 acres each. Buildable areas on those parcels range from 6,900 to 12,900 square feet, with parcel 3 having the smallest total area of buildable area, and parcel 2 having the largest. The total buildable square footage that's proposed for the parcel map is 35,000 square feet, which means the total undeveloped area calculates out to about 4.2 acres. So at the March 20th meeting, public input was gathered, including concerns about neighborhood flooding, the project's drainage impacts with respect to impervious surface, overhead utilities, and roadway widening. The commission chose at that point to continue the public hearing with the request for additional information regarding neighborhood and project level drainage. So here we're taking a look at some of the images provided by the public commenters. The image on the left shows surface flooding occurring at the intersection of Gladys and Seymour. And the image on the right shows an overflowing roadside ditch on Seymour, likely due to a plugged downstream culvert. Staff conducted a review of the existing drainage assets in the neighborhood, including roadside ditches and driveway culverts. And that analysis concluded that due to insufficient and deferred maintenance, surface flooding is indeed occurring in the neighborhood during high rainfall events, as demonstrated in the photos by the public commenters here. So here are some additional images at the intersection of Davis and Seymour, which is the northwest boundary of the proposed project. In these images, you can clearly see the roadside ditch on Seymour at capacity and the larger drainage channel on the property restricting flows due to overgrown vegetation and insufficient maintenance. So here's a map we put together showing existing culverts in the neighborhood. Driveway culverts are shown in orange, and culverts crossing roads are shown in yellow. The arrows in blue represent the flow direction of the stormwater, and it was discovered that many of these culverts are not discharging water as they're intended. Because the culverts and the roadside ditches are within the public right-of-way, it was agreed that the city's Public Works Operations and Maintenance Division would increase maintenance of these drainage assets to ensure that they're functioning properly and prevent future surface flooding and roadway flooding. Public Works O&M has also agreed to increase maintenance of the larger drainage channel on the subject property that was overgrown with vegetation, as we saw in the prior photos. So moving on to utilities, the applicant is requesting a waiver of the utility undergrounding requirement due to costs. This map shows what staff believe is a possible configuration for undergrounding of the utilities, but we can't say for certain what the ultimate final design would be until a project is started with PG&E, specifically PG&E's Service Planning Division. As you can see on the map, 4 poles along the project's frontage would be removed and undergrounded, with new poles placed at the corner boundaries of the property, and potentially 2 new poles placed across Davis and Seymour roads. Again, subject to review by PG&E. As was discussed in the staff report, and as you'll hear later tonight with the climate action plan item, utility undergrounding serves as a climate resiliency measure due to the fact that overhead utilities lose power much more frequently and for longer durations during extreme weather events. Undergrounding of overhead utilities also reduces visual clutter, has been proven to increase property values, and aligns with the city's overall goals for high quality development. The Planning Commission, I will note, does have prior precedent for requiring utility undergrounding in this neighborhood. In 2021, the Commission required a similar 4-lot map at Marshall and Otis to underground utilities along Marshall Road. Furthermore, undergrounding would allow for the consolidation of the drainage improvements on Seymour Avenue and make it easier for crews to maintain the drainage channel on the property. And I'll explain that in more detail in a few slides here. Okay, so let's take a look at the frontage improvements. So the image on the left is Seymour Avenue looking north towards Davis Road. And the image on the right shows a section of Harmon Road that was constructed to the complete ultimate final design of the Rural Road Standard, which this project would be required to construct. So some of the differences that you'll notice right off the bat is the 6-foot wide gravel shoulder and the roadside ditch that are apparent on the section of Harmon Road, where it's not currently apparent on Seymour Avenue. So this image here is taken closer to the intersection of Seymour and Davis Road. So in the yellow, I've attempted to overlay where the new 6-foot wide gravel shoulder would be constructed and the new roadside ditch immediately adjacent to it in green. So the gravel shoulder just adjacent to the asphalt roadway on Seymour, and then further west of that, or east of that, sorry, would be the new roadside ditch in green. So this image is the same intersection, but looking south now on Seymour Road. So again, we can see the 6-foot wide gravel shoulder and adjacent roadside ditch in green. And in red, you'll see the existing larger drainage channel on the property. And the blue colored rectangle just to the east of the drainage channel is where a new maintenance road would be required to be constructed if the utilities were not undergrounded. The reason that would occur is because this maintenance road would be required to provide public works crews access to service that area in red, being the larger drainage channel. They wouldn't be able to access it from Seymour because of that a new roadside ditch that you're seeing there in green. So instead, they would access the drainage channel directly from the property. So this image here shows what is staff's preferred solution to the roadway widening and drainage configuration. So it's important to note that this solution requires undergrounding of utilities. And what you're seeing here is the need actually for a larger, approximately 15-foot wide gravel shoulder on Seymour that eliminates the need for that maintenance road. What this also does is it directs the drainage directly into that existing larger drainage channel. And the reason this solution is preferred is because it would then allow Public Works to access the drainage channel for maintenance and upkeep directly from Seymour Avenue, from the right-of-way, and would not require that additional maintenance access road on the property. So this here is regarding the frontage on Davis Road. So here again are the images showing what the frontage improvements would look like. Again, you see the area in yellow being the new 6-foot wide gravel shoulder and the new roadside ditch pushed further onto the property, just adjacent to that. Again, similar to what we see there in the ultimate roadway improvement on Harmon Road. So as a reminder, staff is recommending that the commission conduct a public hearing, certify the CEQA exemption, adopt resolution 25-5 PC, and deny the request for waiver of underground utilities. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Elijah. All right, at this time, we'd like to go ahead and take public comment first. Do we have any public comments on this item?
We do. Johnny's.
Thank you for hearing me. This was news to me tonight. This is not what we discussed with your department over the last several weeks. I am completely bummed. This last 6 weeks has cost me around $8,000, the delay. About $2,500 of that is the talking that's been going on to come up with this solution. I should not be responsible for neighborhood flooding, but yet I am being held responsible for it, and I will be the one that has to build that road. I will be the one that has to underground those utilities, not the city. I mean, this is absurd. It's costing me thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that are not my responsibility. Up until 5 minutes ago, I was of the understanding that we could still service the ditch from Seymour with a wider shoulder, leaving the poles in place. It makes no sense to remove 4 poles only to put 4 other ones up. That's absurd. There's no net gain there. A backhoe tractor can easily service around those poles. There's 2 or 3 of them on Seymour. You're talking about this much space. You can go on either side of those. It doesn't need to be undergrounded. And the rest of the neighborhood won't get undergrounded, so it's going to be this short little section. Everything else is built out. And so it's just going to be a little, I don't know. I thought tonight this was going to be a slam dunk. Last time I was here, I was ambushed, and I'm being ambushed again tonight, and I don't like it. And I'm hoping that my statement going on record here will somehow abate future prospect builders just for their own personal property, not for big subdivisions and big gain. It's got to change. This process is insane. I'm just telling you that.
Thank you, Mr. Zahara. We have another.
Brandon Minto.
Hello, good evening. I want to begin by thanking the commission for allowing for a deeper discussion on this topic, and to the city staff, I want to say thank you for responding to many of the concerns that the community raised in the last round and the public comments that we offered. So just a couple quick questions on some of the items that were left unaddressed. So in particular, just for example, natural cultural resources goal number 3. So it's no new septic systems within a mile of existing infrastructure, right? So I can understand, we can understand in the community, okay, 0.9, 0.8, 0.7 miles away, okay, yeah, it's a goal, right? Look the other way, maybe not apply it in that instance. But for this particular project, existing infrastructure is less than a quarter mile away. So it does beg the question, if we're not choosing to apply this goal at 0.2, 0.25 miles, when are we choosing to apply it? So we are curious and just to the thought process that goes into the consideration of goals. And, you know, I know there's a lot of pieces. We know there's a lot of pieces. And so when do we choose to apply, you know, certain goals and when do we choose to dismiss them? So that's the first question. The second question, at the last hearing on this item, there was testimony relating to the recent California law affecting the ability to put in an ADU. And it seemed to indicate the testimony that state law supersedes local law, and that if this proposed development were allowed to go through with that open space, that the whole goal of the clustering, right, is to preserve that open space in the middle, that the California law would supersede it, and that any of those 4 property owners would be able to put an ADU in that open space that was intended to be preserved as open space. So we would just appreciate clarity on that item. If we could just get real crystal clear, does state law in this particular instance supersede the local zoning, and even with the clustering and the preservation of that open space, with the new law that California has allowing for ADUs, would somebody be able to still build a home on that space? So we are seeking clarity on that too. And thank you again for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Minto.
We have no additional requests to speak.
Elijah, did you want to have a moment to respond to Mr. Minto's questions? Because I think I might need some clarity on the goal he's touching on, as well as the ADU and the applicability to California law overriding local.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with the response regarding the well and septic systems. So the process here that we have to go through with these parcel maps, especially in the rural areas of the city, which it should be noted that this project is within the rural core, which is called out in the general plan land use map. So this is part of the rural core of the city. A lot of the surrounding properties in this neighborhood have well and septic systems. What we do as part of the parcel map process is we forward the map and the proposal to Yolo County Environmental Health, who is in charge of reviewing applications for new well and septic systems. So we kind of hand off the project to them to have them take a look at all the regulations that they need to check to ensure that the well and septic systems can operate in a safe manner. One of the most critical parts of that review is for them to review setbacks between each well and each septic system, right? So that was forwarded to the county. We did receive a letter of approval from Yolo County approving the configuration that you're seeing here in the parcel map. So we have that on file. That was checked against all of the state and different regulations that Yolo County is held to check for these new systems. There is a section of the municipal code that specifically calls out when a connection to city sewer is required. And I can provide that to you, but it is in the municipal code that states, and this is what we've relied upon, is within 200 feet. So this project is about 1,200 feet from the closest sewer system down on Marshall Road. So it would be a substantial lateral all the way down to service this project. So we you know, the way staff has reviewed these kind of proposals is to first take a look at can these new systems function with regards to Yolo County requirements, and are they longer than 200 feet away from the closest service. So that's what we've relied upon in the review of this project. Regarding ADU law, yeah, the city currently does apply and is compliant with all of the current ADU legislation. It's constantly changing. I think, every other year there seems to be new regulation with regards to ADUs. So that's something that the city is required to comply with. And so regarding the parcel map specifically, with the creation of 4 new properties, there would be an allowance for the properties to come in with ADUs under existing state law. So as long as they were compliant with state law, these properties, if they had a primary unit, they would be allowed to construct currently 1 ADU under state law, but in the future, if that changes to increase that number, the city would be required to comply with that and to permit those.
In regards to that, is that, so, we don't have that parcel. Would that then, ADU need to be included into buildable area as here?
It most certainly would not be permitted to be within the leach field area. I mean, what we would do when we would take in a new ADU permit is we would have to go and take a look at what was approved under the parcel configurations here. So we would have to take a look at this map. We wouldn't allow a structure to be constructed in a leach field system. I don't think that's good practice.
Right.
But with regards to the buildable area, that's something that we would have to take a look at. And I'm not sure, Andrea and Jeff, if you would be able to speak to that a little closer.
Yeah, thank you, Elijah. I'm Andrea Aus, the Director of Community Development. Elijah is correct, and thank you for that question. What we would likely do is through either the final map process or as a condition of approval potentially, is we would restrict any structures outside of that buildable area as noted on.
Let me just add to that, in the same manner that County Environmental Health has to approve this design, County Environmental Health would not of residential. So that doesn't mean that there couldn't be some different configuration. It's a little speculative today, but there would be a number of checks where that said, the state of California is in the habit years of adopting more and more regulations over rules. That is just the reality. I would not recommend that we try to anticipate where this will go and try to plan in a way that would prohibit some state. But ultimately, the configuration leach field
Build it.
It's possible. I think that's something that would have to be checked with Yolo County. But yeah, I mean, they do have to take into consideration the configuration of all the properties. But that's something that, again, Yolo County would be involved with during that review.
Yeah, and also on that, along that same topic, considering the size of the buildable areas on the different parcels, so for example, I noticed that the buildable area in parcel 3, which appears it seems about the same size as the rest of the parcel, but their buildable area on that parcel is substantially smaller than some of the others. Can you explain the rationale behind that? Because I'm curious, And if approved, then is it possible for the location of these buildable areas to be rotated, shifted, or moved to other areas of the property? If my memory serves me correctly, this open area here was deliberate for, if I'm not mistaken, was it like bird migration or something like that?
Foraging habitat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so right, it was a deliberate choice to configure the parcels in this way. So should the planning commission choose to approve the map, the buildable areas would be on the final map. So you wouldn't have leeway to start moving them around. It would be the approve action by the commission. Regarding the buildable area on parcel 3 being a lot smaller than what you're seeing on the other parcels is we had to work around to fit the driveway access to parcel 4, respecting setbacks, in compliance with fire department requirements, in compliance with the leach field size requirements. So there were a lot of different factors that were driving at essentially shrinking the buildable area for parcel 3.
Okay, well, do have a few other questions as well then. That was one of them. In your presentation, you had mentioned that in a prior development size over at Marshall and Otis, that the property was required to underground the utilities at that site. And thus the same requirement being asked of this site. Can you explain it and help us out in explaining what's the purpose of the undergrounding of the utilities?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to provide some more context to that. So it is a general plan goal. It's in the general plan. It's a climate resiliency measure, right? So we want to make sure that our communities are safe. We want to make sure that they have reliable access to utilities, including electricity. I think in areas such as this, being a rural environment, if it were approved on well and septic systems, which we're proposing tonight, those systems often run off of electricity. So potentially, not functioning during times of blackouts, which often coincide with, extreme weather events. Furthermore, it really serves as a way for the city to start really get the ball rolling and progressing the action on bringing us up to standard, because our standard in the city is to require utilities to be undergrounded. So that's kind of our base level. The project such as this, and as well as the project on Marshall and Otis, we're talking about hundreds of feet of frontage and overhead utility length on our public roadways. That would be brought down and undergrounded, providing not only a safer driving environment, but as well as a more stable environment for utilities and power to the residents.
Okay. So if that's the purpose, then why, if the requiring the undergrounding and the removal of 4 poles, what's then the purpose? The additional 4 poles. And I know you're not PG&E, so maybe you can't answer that directly, but give us a general idea.
Let me pull up. So here's our diagram we have here. Again, this is our best guess of what the configuration could look like. When we underground utilities in an area that currently has overhead utilities, you had to find a good location to bring them down. Often that's with what they call setting poles. So again, the project in front of you is requesting an entitlement, being the parcel map. It's a requirement per the municipal code and the general plan to have these undergrounded. So it's possible that we end up in a situation here where we do have new poles set across the street to facilitate the undergrounding for this project. I can't say for certain, but it's going to be up to the PG&E service planning to figure out and to tell the applicant how that should work.
Are there any instances when it's the city's responsibility or the city take responsibility to underground utilities?
In most cases, actually, when there's not, discretionary action before the commission, where they have authority to require that. If the undergrounding were waived for a project such as this, the project would be allowed to move forward with a service of overhead utilities for now. But in the future, should the city decide to undertake a capital improvement project, for example, to come in the future and do utility undergrounding, it would be on the city's requirement to then come in and underground the frontage here. So we have an opportunity now. We have a request here for an entitlement where the city does have the discretion to require this.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause I just remember, what was it, 2005, 23, 2, when we have. Yeah. No, but I'm thinking back to, no, not to over the last few years when we had those very high weather years and power was lost. I mean, 'cause I live not too far from this development, not the area, so you know. I'm in Ridgeway Lake, about a quarter mile away, crows fly. But the area surrounding my neighborhood, and I think this area may have been included in that, where they lost power for days, multiple days on end. Whereas my neighborhood, I think we got a flick. That were kind of questioned there was that. So that was the smart question. But again, if there's, and I guess I kind of understand the reasoning behind that, because I think that was one of the first questions that I had one of the other projects as well, about undergrounding, and if the city actually had plans in work to initiate some sort of undergrounding down there, where trying to avoid some of the issues that we had in those high weather years a few years back.
Yeah, so I can't speak to if there's any planned undergrounding projects in this neighborhood. I think I have to ask Andrea to comment on that.
Yeah, there are no plans to underground through our capital improvement program. I should note that oftentimes when we have older areas of town, for example, in the north area, through the capital improvement program, if there are projects that consider widening or improvement of an existing right-of-way, oftentimes undergrounding will be a part of that. But the vast majority of undergrounding comes as a result of private development and the requirement that we have in the code to underground utilities. Most of the undergrounding that you see is because of the code requirement applied to private development.
I've really, could you speak to Mr. Zapar's comment that this would be the only parcel around underground? And I guess what's the net benefit from a resilience? Just the one.
Yeah, so the neighborhood currently, as it stands today, is primarily served by overhead lines. But I would say, in response to what's the net benefit, we're getting a start on what could potentially be a large-scale future project down the road, should the city city and planning commission and city council decide to fund a more whole-scale utility undergrounding project. So really, we're getting a start here in a neighborhood. We're getting close to 900 feet of underground frontage benefit from this project. It's a kind of hub intersection of the neighborhood. So it's staff's opinion that we believe it's a good place to start on starting to make progress here on what is ultimately a goal that's been stated by the Planning Commission and the City Council to bring these lines underground.
So if the city did decide Are there economies of the whole area versus?
I'm not quite sure. I would probably look to some of our engineers to try to answer that. Unfortunately, our principal engineer couldn't be here tonight due to some unforeseen circumstances. But I imagine that could be the case, but I can't really say for sure.
I can jump in just from past experience in working in several jurisdictions. I have never seen the city or any sort of local government fund a project that's simply undergrounds. It's usually, as I said before, part of a larger road improvement capital project, because because there can be economies of scale when you're looking at an entire road improvement project versus simply going in and under. We do not in this area, no.
Any other comments or questions? So I was not here for the March 20th meeting when we had the initial hearing. But Mr. Minto opened up with my comments that I wanted to share, which was I thought, well, first of all, I want to commend my fellow commissioners, city staff, and the residents and Mr. Zapara for what I thought was a healthy dialogue necessary to ensure that all facets of this project were considered, not only the project itself, but any potential ramifications to neighboring homes and what we then learned to be drainage issues. Not sure if we have any residents here that were initially a part of presenting on the drainage challenges, but I was hoping to hear that they were pleased with what staff were able to come back and report out on. So I'll assume no news is good news and that staff's report satisfied whatever initial concerns were brought forward regarding that. Oh, were you?
You're
I
gonna
meant
need-
when I
You're going to
said-
need to
when-
reopen the public hearing if
Oh,
you're going to allow
sorry.
people to testify a second time.
Okay, sorry about that. Give me just a moment here. Let me just finish what my comments were going to be. And so with all of that said, it's not lost on me personally, Mr. Zapara, that there may be a financial burden as a result of what I saw to be the only thing that I would have said had I been at that initial meeting, and what I will likely say today is we do have an onus of responsibility to adhere to the rules, laws, and requirements that govern us to ensure the health and safety and responsibility for all West Sacramentans. And for that reason, the only thing that I was prepared to speak to today is holding us as a commission body accountable to ensuring that the undergrounding is within mind to not create a financial hardship on you, Mr. Zapara, but to ensure the overall public safety of those that may be impacted by not adhering to the general plan, PFS 6.7, as well as the municipal code. So for those are my thoughts, and given that, I'm prepared to take a motion on the floor if there's anybody that's interested in moving. So need more questions, time?
I was just going to agree with you. I am sympathetic to Mr. Zapara's comments, but resiliency is important. And I live in the state and didn't have so. So yeah, I would move to approve staff.
I'd like to echo the sentiments of the comment of my commissioner as well.
And Mr. Minto, I'm sorry, I'm filling in today, and I acted out of order, so we're prepared to take the vote, but before we do that, look to our...
You're good? You've got a motion and a second?
Great, then we'll go ahead and call vote.
Commissioner Sablon?
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson?
Aye.
Acting Chair Olivares? Aye. Commissioner Wong?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Zapara, for your time today.
Any interested party may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission in this matter to the City Council by filing a written appeal with the City Clerk within 10 days of tonight's action, and that appeal must be accompanied by the appropriate filing fee.
All right, we're moving on to item number 5. This is the public hearing regarding the proposed annual omnibus zoning code amendments to Title 17, zoning of the municipal code.
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Daniel Berryman, Senior Planner for the city, and I'll be presenting on the annual omnibus zoning code amendments for 2025. The zoning code requires periodic updates to keep up with changes both locally and statewide. These amendments are often limited by existing regulations that are no longer applicable, require updating due to changes in state law, or are based on input from staff or the public to clarify any unclear or ambiguous language in the code. Planners treat the code as a living document. Our aim is to improve it where we can, and this means hearing from city staff and the community to better serve residents of West Sacramento. This code update focuses on several state law housing-related actions, as well as other changes staff has been provided since the last code amendments were approved in 2024. A total of 11 proposed sections of the code are going to be amended this evening, or possibly amended this evening, and you can see those here. I'll briefly go through these proposed amendments, starting with allowing multifamily projects with at least 10% on-site affordable units to be constructed in the mixed-use neighborhood commercial, or MUNC zone, as permitted by right. Currently, these are allowed via conditional use permit. Allowing 2-unit dwellings or duplexes to be permitted in the R1 zone. This change is based on SB 9, which became effective in 2022. Removing minimum lot depth width ratio from the development standards tables in agricultural, residential, commercial mixed use, and employment zones. Correcting a grammatical error finding in the findings section of the use permit chapter 17.38. Requiring the recording of lot line agreements to be fully executed. Including minimum unit densities in residential zones to be fully consistent with the general plan. Next, clarifying the summary of review authorities for decisions and appeals section. Establishing an increased noticing requirement for ordinances and amendments involving real property in compliance with 2904. Staff utilized this extra noticing period for this meeting, in fact. Updating land use classification and definitions for construction and material yards. Updating definitions for lot area to clarify gross acreage for size and density. And lastly, updating definitions for outdoor storage and parking lots and structures to exclude parking of semi-trailer trucks. This action tonight is exempt from CEQA review pursuant to 15305, minor alterations to land use limitations, and 15321, enforcement of actions by regulatory agencies of the CEQA guideline. If amendments are considered and approved this evening, staff intends to take this item for approval at a subsequent city council meeting. With that, staff respectfully recommends that the Planning Commission conduct the public hearing, find that the action is exempt from CEQA, and adopt the resolution recommending that City Council consider amending Title 17 of the Muni Code regarding the annual omnibus zoning code amendments. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions?
So for item amendment, for the adding the minimum density, that item, so on the table it says maximum density, and then we're adding minimums. I don't know if something changed minimum and maximum density or allowable density. as it stands, we'll have maximum density and a minimum
I see.
numbers.
Yeah, this is just to include the minimum densities. So we have in, believe, in item number 6, we have the table that shows the minimum densities, starting from R1 all the way to R3.
But the column that says what, I think says maximum, where the row is.
Yes, yes. I see, yeah. So we can amend that to include minimum and maximum density
Oh.
For that question.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then for outdoor storage and parking,
Mhm.
are we amending definition for out?
Yeah, we've received some feedback, and staff has kind of wrestled with parking of semi-truck trailers, and we wanted to make sure it was clear that semi-trailer truck would not be included in outdoor storage. So we are adding that provision in the definition.
So the park underlined, where did that,
That's the current definition.
that's then the same?
Same for parking lots and trucks.
Oh, I think I was just a little confused. The definition's,
Right.
but that's the whole,
That's the whole definition for outdoor storage and parking lot.
Oh.
We're just adding the parking of tractor trailers or semi trucks is not.
thank you. With the clarification, minimum and max.
If there's no further questions, do we have any public comment on this item?
No, we did.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, well, with that said, I'll entertain a motion on the floor.
I'll move to approve staff's recommendation.
I'll second that.
Okay, we'll call the vote.
Will that be with?
I'll amend my amendment to, yes, to approve staff's recommendations with the modification.
Okay, and now we'll call the vote.
Commissioner Sablon?
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson?
Aye.
Acting Chair Olivares?
Aye.
Commissioner Wong?
Aye.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Daniel.
much.
And congrats on your award from yesterday. Okay, that moves us to item number 6. This is a presentation and discussion on the proposed climate action and adaptation plan and consideration of Resolution 25-8 PC, recommending approval of the proposed climate action plan.
All right, so before you tonight with the proposed climate action and adaptation plan. With me tonight are our consultants at AECOM, Josh and Vanessa, and also our sustainability manager, Ryan Burnett. So tonight I will go into the recommended action, what is before you in our climate action plan, as well as an overall context of where the city's emissions are coming from. I'll get into what kind of outreach we did for this plan, and then our goals and actions for reducing emissions in the city, and how we're going to implement this. So tonight we're requesting this Planning Commission approve Resolution 25-8 PC, and that would recommend the City Council adopt Resolution 25-49, which adopts the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan and also finds that adoption of this cap is within the scope of the general plan EIR pursuant to section 15168 of the CEQA guidelines. So this cap before you tonight, it serves as the community's roadmap to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, strengthen local climate adaptation, and increase resiliency in an equitable manner throughout the city. It also provides CEQA streamlining benefits for future development projects. This is a CEQA qualified cap, so as part of the California Environmental Quality Act, projects need to show how they are reducing their greenhouse gas emissions and not creating a significant impact. And that's really hard to do for a smaller project, because greenhouse gas emissions are planet-wide. So at the cumulative impact. So when we have this document that applies citywide, it really helps for streamlining for future development projects. I want to highlight this is not the city's first go at climate action. City's been quite at the forefront of this for decades. And you can see here whether it's increasing trails or making it easier for people to walk, bike, scoot, really lowering the need for the automobile. The city's been doing that for really since incorporation. Also really revitalizing the waterfront, deindustrializing it and making it more a compact urban community where you don't need to have a car, where everything is close by. We have CalSTRS. They have their new building is LEED certified, and we also have quite a lot of flood protection. The city's put in hundreds of millions of dollars to increase the levee protection. And you can see here the EV charger. The city's been putting in a lot of EV chargers, really trying to increase EV adoption. So really this climate action and adaptation plan is really formalizing goals and initiatives that are already occurring and taking it one step further. So the inventory for our citywide greenhouse gas emissions was done in 2018. This really started during COVID, and we needed to use a year that was a good baseline year. And 2020, 2021, that's a good baseline year for looking at emissions because driving was way down. So you can see here, 58% of the emissions in the city come from on-road vehicles, people driving to work, to any driving that's included there. And then you have emissions from commercial and residential building energy. So heating and cooling your home, your business, that's where those emissions come from. So you can see those are the two major chunks of the pie. So that's really, when you look at the actions, what are the most impactful actions? It's shifting people to electric vehicles or other non-carbon vehicles, or also for the building emissions, really getting rid of natural gas. And then you can see the rest of the pie there is landfill emissions, off-road vehicles like forklifts, or waterborne vehicles. So here's the emissions forecast, where we were in 2018, projecting out with the growth in the city all the way to 2030 and then 2045. You can really see the emissions, they grow. This takes into account population growth. You can see that, if we don't do anything, the emissions are going to keep going up. So the goal in the cap is to be carbon neutral, consistent with state targets by 2045. And then we have a minimum and a more ambitious target by 2030. So the minimum target is 25% reduction from 2018. And that's a per capita emission, so it takes into account population growth. Our overall emissions may grow, but as long as the per capita emissions are going down, that's what we're trying to get to. And really, this is the state goal is 2045 carbon neutrality. So what exactly is that? Carbon neutrality is a state of net zero carbon dioxide emissions. So you're not putting out any more than going in. So you're reducing emissions as much as possible and removing any remaining emissions through other processes like carbon offsets, but that's really a last resort. Here's another illustration of where the emissions would go if we didn't do anything. And then where the goal, the green, the dashed line is if you take all these actions in the cap and they're adopted on time, you can see where we'd end up by 2045 compared to the goal. So even if we do everything in this document, we're still going to be short. And that's the state of California. They recognize that, really relying on future technology. But if you do everything in this cap, you're reducing emissions by 78%. So really, we're following in the state's lead a lot of other jurisdictions. AB 1279 requires California to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible, no later than 2045. And there have been quite a lot of state mandates coming out. One of them is requiring that all electricity be from carbon-free sources by 2045 and 90% by, I believe, 2035. So this is really on the utility providers to make sure they source their electricity from carbon-free sources, so wind, hydro, solar. There's also been requirements for construction for all residential to have solar. Our next building code cycle is getting a lot more stringent, making it making homes set up have heat pumps and more efficient buildings. On the transportation side, the Air Resources Board has the Advanced Clean Truck Program, mandating that all new medium duty and heavy duty vehicles be zero emission by 2045. The Air Resources Board has also requiring that 100% of new vehicles and light duty trucks sold in California be zero emission by 2035. And really it goes on and on. So we're kind of, we're not acting alone on this. And we need to show that we're consistent with state targets. So we've done a lot of outreach on this plan. Really, a few years ago, we had a virtual workshop in 2021. We had an online questionnaire go out at the same time. We met with the local Chamber of Commerce in 21 and also more recently this year to go over what's in here and how it affects the business community. We had a workshop in front of the Planning Commission back in 21 and also the Environment and Utilities Commission. That was on the actions and the goals, making sure we have that, got input on that. We had virtual roundtable meetings with local community-based organizations, and we also had 2 listening sessions at Sal's Tacos back in 2022. So we've done a lot of outreach, and a lot of that outreach informs what was put in the plan. This document has also been reviewed by all the department heads in the city multiple times. It's been gone through a lot of review. So what's before you tonight is what we think is the final product. So in this plan, we feature local climate champions, really showing that what's in here is attainable, it's doable. We have local resident in here. We have Nugget Grocery in here, showing how they are donating food. They're recovering their food and diverting it from the landfill. And Brian Burnett, our sustainability manager, will get into that in a little bit. It also highlights CalSTRS and their most recent phase 2 office building and how it's net zero energy and LEED Platinum. So there are 7 overarching goals. The first one is to promote cleaner vehicles and equipment in our community. The second is reimagining how we move people and goods. Third is designing a future with zero carbon power sources. Fourth, plan for all electric buildings citywide. Fifth is creating a waste-free city and building a carbon negative and livable community. And the last one, creating a resilient community that protects our most vulnerable residents from climate hazards. And that last one was added in more recently, as well as a few of the appendices on how do we fund everything in here. So really, we're looking for voluntary compliance first. Really going to be looking at education, outreach, providing incentives to residents and business owners. If you like rebates for putting a charger in your garage or converting your your home to have an electric heat pump. really looking for that voluntary action, education. Also, this, having the city lead by example, such as those solar panels, parking lot, City Hall, and putting in more EV chargers, really showing that it can be done. Unfortunately, it does have mandates in there, but that's going to be further on. And I want to emphasize that everything in here is going to require follow-on implementing ordinances that will they'll each go through quite a big outreach process and come back before the commission and other commissions, and also go to city council. So this is really a framework, and then every action you see in here will require follow-on ordinances and outreach. So here's an example of what each action looks like. There are 26 of them. You have your estimated greenhouse gas emission reduction for the interim target year of 2030 and then 2045. You have what you can do as a business owner or resident to get there. Each action identifies equity issues and solutions, recognizing that this is going to be expensive, and not everybody in our community can afford to, for example, buy an electric vehicle, or maybe they're a renter and they can't make their home more energy efficient. So really identifying that solutions. And then you have the action description and implementation tactics and metrics. How do we measure progress to meeting that action? So table 4.5 in our CAP, these are the actions that have the greatest reduction potential. And you can see the reduction by 2030 if we implement this year or shortly after, and then by 2045. So really these actions are expanding the electric vehicle charging network, adopting building electrification programs and transitioning our existing building stock to being no natural gas, enhancing utility coordination with PG&E, provide carbon-free electricity, and as I mentioned earlier, that's already a requirement from the state. And also, trying to encourage them to offer additional building efficiency and retrofit rebates and funding. Like SMUD, they have a lot of rebates and programs to help facilitate this, and really leaning on PG&E to do more. Action 14, establishing energy performance standards and GHG emission limits for existing commercial buildings. And then lastly, mandating all electric new construction in a phased approach to eliminate fossil fuel use. So these are the top ones. Ryan will get into what are the phasing. We have a phase 1 and a phase 2, and most of these are going to be in there, and he'll get. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan Burnett, our sustainability manager.
Thank you, Seamus.
Okay, good evening. I am Ryan Burnett, Sustainability Manager. A little history of myself. I've been with the city about 10 years. I got the job basically a month after my son was born, so it's easy to track how long I've been here. Most of that time was in water conservation, doing house calls. So I don't know if I've done a house call at your house, but maybe. I'm now the sustainability manager, and I've been working very closely with Seamus, who's done a very good job at getting the CAP ready. So as sustainability manager, I'm going to be in charge of the implementation phase. So there's 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 occurs years 1 and 2. So out of the 26 actions, these are the actions that we're going to be starting with first. So first one, expand the electric vehicle charging network through zoning code requirements and installation of public charging infrastructure. I'm sure you guys have noticed, but city doesn't wait for plans to happen to start work. So we already have charging stations. We already have grants that we've used. So we're just going to be building upon that knowledge and that work. And then we're also going to be working with planning to update the zoning code. Establish zero emission vehicle targets for municipal fleet. So again, we're already working on this. We have a partnership with Yellow County, and we're going to be doing a county-wide zero emission vehicle municipal fleet analysis. Is going to help us really zone in on exactly what we need to do, which cars need to start getting phased out, which grants we can start doing to make it a reality, because it is a responsibility for us as a city to lead and to make normalization of the use expanding the food recovery network. So in the sustainability division, we are in charge of waste reduction. I manage the waste management contract. So we are actually, I think, doing pretty well on this topic already. So we launched Smart Truck last fall, which monitors contamination. We work with the YOLO Food Bank and Mercy Coalition to get a lot of food out of the trash and to people in need. And we're even working currently on expanding this to basically, when it comes to food recovery, there's tier 1 and tier 2. Tier 1 is like canned goods, foods that are more long lasting, and tier 2 is hot food, pre-made food. And it's, as you might imagine, it's kind of difficult to get that food from that restaurant or that ballpark or that IKEA to people in need because there's anxiety about that. So we are working with partners to make it very smooth so that those businesses who are required by SB 1383, which was mentioned earlier, to donate their excess food, we're working on making that happen. And if we are able to make that happen, we will be one of the first in the state because it is a pretty touchy topic. So like I said, we're already moving forward on these things even before the cap is adopted. Develop and implement an urban forest master plan. So that will be mainly done by our Parks Department, but we will of course help as needed. And integrate adaptation actions across city operation processes and policies. So in anticipation of adoption of the cap, I have started working division by division, going through each of these 26 actions to make sure that who I think is going to be the primary and secondary responsible entity within the city to do it are in fact the responsible entity. So that, and the reason I'm doing that is because once the cap gets adopted, I'm planning on having a super duper team of people within the city who are responsible for taking those 26 actions and making them meaningful and real. So I'm already on that way, and my goal is the second the cap gets adopted, I've already got that team in place. We set up a meeting and we start getting to it. Okay, so that was all phase 1. Phase 2 gets more into planning code, the more long-range topic. So action 15, mandate all electric new construction. Action 13, develop and adopt a building electrification program, incentives for existing buildings. Action 11, enhance utility coordination and advocate for the city's utility provider. I've been meeting with PG&E already. Action 9, extend regional transit services and allocate funding to increase accessibility. I'm sure you guys have seen VIA around. VIA has started going out into downtown, which is really good because it can actually go to Kaiser. So as you know, this is getting redundant at this point, but we're already working on these things. We just need the cap to get adopted so that we do have that full support of council and we have that framework so that we can then come back here, and if we need their green light for certain actions or we need a funding, then we can say, this cap has gone through the commission, the EU Commission, the Planning Commission, and Council. It's been adopted. It's been blessed. Let's work.
So next steps, we're looking for adoption tonight of Resolution 25-8PC. Hoping to go to City Council shortly after, sometime this spring or early summer. And then it's all about implementation. So this is actually already on the City Council's strategic priority list, both as a policy item and a strategic principle. So it's definitely something that we got to get done. So I'll open up for Q&A. Here's a link to the city's page on this if you have any more information. And Josh and Vanessa did a lot of work on this too with ACOM, but they're also available for questions. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Seamus. Should we hear? All right, well, we'll take this time to hear from the consultants. If that's something that, what?
I don't think they have any prepared remarks,
Oh,
but if we
okay.
have any technical questions that
All
come
right.
up that
Okay.
I need to call in reinforcements for, they're here.
All right, well, any questions from commissioners?
not a technical question or anything, but the EV chargers used to be free to use. Was there any possibility to get like a discount rate to encourage people to charge with EV?
I'd have to inquire with our economic development department. They managed the EV chargers on city lots. I know it's pretty discounted right now, but I have to check with them on how they would fit that.
I may have missed this in here, but how did we come up with phase 1 and phase, or, yeah.
Yeah, so really looking at what's the kind of lowest hanging fruit, what's the easiest to do, and also what's the most impactful. So some of those, if you don't start them now, it's going to be a lot harder long term. For example, building electrification. If somebody builds a new building now that has natural gas, chances are you're not going to get that changed over for quite a while. So really want to make sure that anything that we can do now that has long-term implications, we do it now. But building electrification is a big one.
And so for some of them, they were captured in Goal 2. We didn't have the breakdown of the carbon CO2 reductions because SACOG captured that. So how do we know how much we do in the city contribute SACOG reduction?
Yeah, that one I'll turn to our consultant team.
I was ready for that. I will do my best. This is a 5-year project, and I will try to remember all of the technical analysis from 5 years. The SACOG analysis you're referring to is the vehicle miles traveled information that we use to develop the emissions, the greenhouse gas inventory that Seamus showed, and the forecast estimating how emissions might grow or change into the future. Your question is very smart and maybe not answerable with the information that we have now, but the SACOG forecasts about future regional travel, and particularly travel that starts and ends within the city, was informed by the city's general plan and the SACOG long-term regional travel demand modeling process. So we decided to use those forecasts and say, this is the hypothetical likely future scenario, and the reductions from vehicle miles traveled that SACOG is estimating are kind of baked into that future scenario. So what you might see, as Seamus showed, that the greenhouse gas inventory we have in this cap right now is from 2018 data. Cities typically will update greenhouse gas inventories. Some do them annually, some do them on 5-year cycles, but likely that will be a future next step for the cities to develop another greenhouse gas inventory, which is your opportunity to check in and see if the vehicle miles traveled information is actually trending in that direction that we included within the business as usual forecast. And if it is, then I would say you maybe don't need to dig in too much deeper because things are progressing as you thought they might. If it's way off base from what was kind of estimated within that future forecast, maybe that's a good time to take a closer look and see, are there different travel demand reduction programs that we should be thinking about that might then get elevated into one of those priority near-term positions that Seamus was talking about for actions. Is that cool?
I guess I just wanted to see if we have for all residents, affordable and transit versus an e-vehicle where, not everyone building up all the info that as a priority versus pedestrians promoting that kind of more for residents. So I think that's what I was trying to get at. Is it actually such a low reduction that CO2 so low that it's not? Yeah, I guess that's what I was trying to get at.
What is
the numbers?
active transportation. I think part of the equation also in prioritizing those actions into the two phases was not necessarily only looking at the greenhouse gas reduction potential. That was one consideration, but not the only overarching consideration. And it also reminds me that the actions also call out implementation metrics that the city can use to monitor implementation over time. So to the extent that data can be collected for each of those actions, even the ones that don't have specific greenhouse gas reductions attributed to them, that's a good indication of if progress is being made within those actions.
Yeah, thank you. So
Sure.
I was basically trying to get some support to advocate action is what I was trying to
I'll
do.
second that motion.
Okay. But I appreciate, I think all of you worked on this beautiful document. Love all the photos. Great, and yeah, very easy on the eyes. I have more.
I think you may have touched on something, Commissioner Sablon, that I was thinking about, and something that I thought I heard or saw throughout the presentation centered more around the equity outreach. I've never participated in an exercise like this, and so I don't know what the internal dialogues and discussions and all the scenarios that are factored in, but we hear a lot about climate action and all the buzzwords that surround it, and for someone like me that grew up in a not so good neighborhood, very underserved, one of the things I was thinking of is how are we as a city making these goals reachable and achievable for our more vulnerable communities and neighborhoods in the city of West Sacramento.
Yeah, and that really touches on implementation and how we, do outreach and get people to really buy into this plan. So if Brian wants to add any to that.
Yeah, great question and a great concern. That is one of the amendments we made to the document itself, was addressing equity per each action. One of the things that, as an implementer, which I am, I'm already thinking about these things, and something we're actually working on is a home energy audit, where we come to anybody, Broderick, Bright, and we provide free light bulbs, weather stripping, education, toilet diatab, and help people lower their energy bill. Because we know for a lot of people who are in a disadvantaged community, your utility bill is a big deal, and saving something like $10 a month is meaningful. So for us, that is going to be one of our priorities, in addition to the existing phase 1 and phase 2 priorities, because to your point, climate action can be very much not the main concern for a lot of people. The main concern is making sure your family is happy and healthy and fed. So what we want to do in the beginning, in addition to doing all of these things, is start working on outreach, start working on education, and start working on a program that's free, that comes right to people at their homes and gives them education and resources. And our hope is that from that, people can realize that you don't necessarily need to go buy a Tesla to do something meaningful, impact the community. In fact, proper recycling and reducing methane is perhaps the #1 priority when it comes to reducing our major emissions, because methane is so much more powerful and potent than CO2. So just creating that culture of recycling correctly can be something someone can do to be a West Sac climate.
Yeah, and I see what you're saying, and I think a lot of it is, making sure the messaging matches the environment and the lived experiences of folks that make up that particular community, and ensuring that they can not only opt in, but buy into the overall vision of the city, because it's tangible and something that they can actually identify with and act on with confidence, and without feeling like I can't keep up with these bold goals because, they financially don't match what my household looks like. So thank you for that input, and that was my only question on that.
Yeah, and if I could just say a couple more things, we will be translating the materials in Spanish and Russian. You know, when I did outreach for the Smart Truck program, you know, I hit up the Slavic churches and I hit up the Spanish-speaking churches on the north side of town. You know, I believe it's really important to get out into the community and address the concerns and try to empower people on the north side of town that, again, they don't have to make gigantic changes in order to do something meaningful for their community. I'm also working on something called the West Sac Climate Champ outreach program, where people who, you know, it doesn't have to be something extravagant, but even behavior change can be celebrated. You get a sticker, you can put it on your house, you can put it on your car, and there might even be raffle prizes involved where you submit the actions that you've taken, and then you can be rewarded by the city for that. Because the reality is that climate action can feel very doom and gloom, very intense, and very hard to reach. And what I want to do is celebrate the people that have already taken action and help people see that even behavior change can be meaningful.
Thank you, Ryan.
So reading through the thing, I was like, oh, this is all great. It sounds great, but how are we going to do this? And when you came up and you're like, this is what we're doing, bam, 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 already have a team, it was very reassuring and have some optimism on the. So I appreciate it.
Well, I have a couple of questions in terms of the phasing and the goals and how this is going to impact some of the developments and projects that are currently in the pipeline. For example, Yarborough or Liberty. Is that, will this have any sort of impact in terms of the efficiency of the types of homes in the developments that are in the pipeline, in terms of efficiency requirements, be it solar, heat pumps, things like that, that are being installed into these new construction projects that are on the horizon?
So our big development projects are already taking this into account as part of their CEQA process. They have to show how they're reducing their emissions, and they have mitigation measures included. So a lot of them are already doing this. I know the Liberty specific plan, the project applicant on that really promote how, you know, environmentally, how it's a good project from an environmental standpoint. I'm managing the River Park project that we're working on the EIR right now. It'll be put out for public review probably this summer, but that's another thing is, you know, how do you reduce the vehicle miles traveled to reduce emissions? Will it have natural gas at all in the whole project area? And probably not, because don't want to be promoting or encouraging homes to have that. So it's not just the climate action plan, it's future development projects and there's CEQA. One thing, you know, for the natural gas, it's, I think, really important to emphasize is you have, once you have that fixed infrastructure in the ground, you have to have a certain amount of ratepayers paying into it to maintain it. So that could be a future, you know, problem for the whole state, really. You know, if everybody starts moving away from natural gas, but you still have the infrastructure, you know, how does that get maintained? It's kind of a race to the bottom, because it's just going to raise the rates for whoever's left. So if you're, you know, most disadvantaged community or the only ones left that have natural gas, they're paying more for it and maintain the infrastructure. But yeah, back to your question, definitely our large development projects are taking this into account.
So is it, I guess is the city taking actions or with those projects to ensure that their efficiency ratings, I guess, for the homes in terms of less natural gas appliances, like the heat pump, in terms of instead of furnaces in the house, maybe switching from a gas water heater to and you know what I mean? So those types of efficiency things, or those things are that the city asking for those types of things to be implemented into these projects as they come online, start building?
Yes, we're asking for it, as part of the CEQA process. They're also doing it, recognizing that it's sometimes more affordable to do that. And also the state building code is it's moving that direction anyways. It's already requiring more efficient buildings in terms of like kind of windows you have and insulation, more efficiency, making sure your house is set up to have a heat pump in the future, or have the outlet that can accommodate electric stove, all the above really.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because I'll toot my own horn. I mean, my wife and I, we have solar. We moved to a heat pump. We've gotten rid of our gas furnace. So I highly recommend it.
Climate again, Ryan. I have a related question to Commissioner Johnson. How do we fit together, further development and goals, miles, when there's, aside from teleworking, if you have a job, you have to go far. I used to take 37. Oh yeah, the Broadway Bridge. I used to take the 37 and it used to be an hour, but now that's down to 35 minutes maybe to get downtown. But one of the goals was increase stop, but also streamline. So how do we, there seem to be conflicting goals in here in what we're doing how are we gonna reconcile these with the need for housing, the need to do
So
yeah.
reducing vehicle miles traveled it's a tough nut to crack, especially out in our more greenfield development areas in Southport, where people are very reliant on car. But I think really reducing VMT is about reducing emissions. So if you have an electric vehicle that doesn't have emissions, that's one way to go. But yeah, we're looking at having a VMT mitigation, almost like an impact fee, where a new project or new development, if they go in, if they need to reduce their VMT, they pay into a program that can put in more trails or other ways to reduce VMT, like via maybe subsidizing via. Really, it's a very hard question, and it's something that we in the planning division with all of our large projects are really it's also fairly new. How do you reduce VMT? But yeah, it's a tough one, and it requires a lot of kind of a whole approach to how do you solve that.
And I guess by promoting e-vehicles, are we just transferring the emissions out? Where we're mining cobalt, and it's just a struggle with. Yes, e-vehicles are good for us when emissions, but the manufacturing going into all of that. Are we taking that into mind when we're promoting EV?
These are very challenging questions that you're coming up with today, and sometimes philosophical ones. So the short answer is the external EV production emissions are not represented within the city's climate action plan. That is consistent with the way that most climate action planning is done. Those types of emissions you might see in communities if they develop something called a consumption-based emissions inventory, which looks at emissions from a different lens, and it's looking at it through the goods and services that we procure and consume. And then you start to get a different answer on where a community's largest emissions are. The traditional, most common approach to developing an emissions inventory and addressing emissions reduction is the approach that West Sacramento is taking right now, but it doesn't mean that the questions you're bringing up shouldn't be answered. And those questions are coming up a lot more currently regarding global supply chains, resource extraction practices, social justice issues as they relate to development of batteries that go into EVs. But I think to Seamus's point, there's no silver bullet for VMT reduction or for emissions reduction in the transportation sector. And it might be an all of the above option that we need to consider. And I really like that you are bringing that kind of issue to the forefront, just saying we can't just ignore the other impacts that are associated with electric vehicles. And those aren't the only impacts either. There's a lot of good that comes from reducing vehicle miles traveled. If you want to look at it from transportation injury reduction, improved air quality, less congestion, improved quality of life. There's a lot of societal benefits that come from the types of strategies that support a lower vehicle miles traveled lifestyle. And I would just take a moment to applaud the city of West Sacramento in general for leaning heavily into that type of land use and transportation planning perspective as a whole through your general plan. I think the city already does a really great job, especially if you were to compare yourself to other jurisdictions. So it's good to keep pushing yourself further, but I also would applaud you for great infill development work and strategic planning work that the city has already done in various neighborhoods throughout the city. I don't mean that for that to be a non-answer. The short answer is those emissions are not explicitly within the inventory. It doesn't mean that that topic can't be considered and advanced further.
Okay, and I think I don't know, to the extent we could recommend this for the future when we're reviewing this, of taking that former that you mentioned, because it is a global issue, right? It's not West Sacramento.
Right.
So if we're just transferring, have that in the.
Did we have any public comment for this item?
No, we didn't.
All right. Well, we don't have anything else, so we want to thank you, Seamus, for the presentation. I think we collectively all agreed we learned a ton. Thank you for joining Seamus in on the presentation, but the non-presentation. And so, was there an action on this?
I would still like to advocate.
Yeah. There was
Action
a
item
resolution
8,
to approve.
Ryan.
Okay. I'm sorry, what was that, Commissioner?
Oh, so I'm comfortable moving this forward, but I don't know if council can consider adding action part of the phase 1 or implementation.
That's the commission's, if you'd like to include that in your recommended action, we can include that action. So table 3.2 on page 143 of CAP has all the actions listed out, so you can see easily which action we're talking about. But action 8 is allocate funding to expand and connect the active transportation and micro mobility network.
And so that there's also a lot of, right, availability. 20. Okay, well, anyhow, so I will move to approve staff recommendation with recommendation consider incorporating action item into phase 1 or 2.
I'm trying to, can you read?
Yeah, action 8 is allocate funding to expand and connect the active transportation and micro mobility network.
And can you explain one more time again what that means in a more watered down format for me, please?
Yeah, so expanding the active transportation network, cycling, scootering, walking.
I can jump in as well. The Transportation and Mobility Division are spearheading the update to our bike ped trails master plan. They're kicking that off, so that will be a great opportunity to knit the goals of the CAP into that update.
Yeah, and the action description says improving sidewalks, pedestrian crossings, more protected bikeways, bike storage facilities, efficient street lighting, more drinking fountains, and wayfinding.
Right. Go ahead.
You don't have to agree with my recommendation. That was just
I think I speak for all of us in that we believe you. We know you are passionate about this space. And for someone who rides their bike to the planning commission meetings, we entrust that you're doing what's best in support of this. But I'll let anybody else want to weigh in?
No, but I agree. I mean, if there's a champion for this type of project, definitely my commissioner to my right. So I will second her motion with the amendment requested.
Thank you, Commissioner Spillane, and I appreciate all the work that you put in this and the thoughtful questions. It taught me more in just the dialogue itself. So we thank you for the commitment you've made to the city to bike and walk and all the above. So I think, Commissioner Wong, you have any? You good? All right. So I think we're ready for the vote. We're unraveling here.
Commissioner Sablan?
Aye.
Commissioner Jackson?
Aye.
Acting Chair Olivares?
Aye.
Commissioner Wong?
Aye.
All righty. So we've made our way here to the general administration function. Item 7 for any commissioner communications that need to be reported. Hearing none. And so with that, this meeting is adjourned. Have a great evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening.